In a small town next to a beautiful green place lived a young couple called Sarah and Daniel. They lived in a simple, cozy house, but were struggling financially. Life seemed like a daily battle to survive, and the couple could barely afford to buy food and clothes for themselves, let alone for their newborn daughter Aurora. Daniel worked hard in a small local business, while Sarah looked after the house and little Aurora. However, Daniel's salary was insufficient to support the family, and they often found themselves struggling to pay the basic bills. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and Daniel's financial situation became increasingly serious. Despite Daniel's tireless efforts and attempts to save as much as possible, their finances continued to dwindle rapidly. The stress and pressure of not being able to provide enough for their family began to weigh heavily on the young couple's shoulders. Sleepless nights became commonplace as Sarah and Daniel discussed incessantly how they could change their situation. They explored all possible options, but there seemed to be no easy way out. A sense of despair began to take hold of their hearts, and they felt increasingly powerless in the face of the difficulties they faced. The anguish of not being able to provide the basics for their daughter weighed on Sarah and Daniel like a dark cloud, obscuring any ray of hope that still remained. They felt as if they were sinking into an endless abyss with no way out in sight. Meanwhile, Aurora, still so young and innocent, remained oblivious to her parents' struggles. Her laughter and smile continued to light up the house, bringing a little joy to Sarah and Daniel's heavy hearts. They clung to the light that their daughter represented, but at the same time, they felt the weight of responsibility to provide her with a better life. The situation became increasingly desperate, and Sarah and Daniel felt as if they were in a race against time to find a solution before it was too late. The future looked uncertain and bleak, and they wondered if they would be able to weather the storm that seemed to have no end. One day, while they were sitting in their modest home, a thought crossed Sarah's mind. She had heard rumors about a wealthy couple from the neighboring town who had lost their own child and were desperately looking for a new child to adopt. Sarah pondered this possibility for a moment, aware that this decision could drastically change the course of their lives. On the one hand, the idea of giving Aurora up for adoption was distressing for Sarah. She loved her daughter more than anything in the world and couldn't imagine her life without her. However, the prospect of offering Aurora a comfortable and secure life, with all the opportunities that they themselves could not provide, was tempting. Sarah shared her thoughts with Daniel, and the two of them spent hours discussing the pros and cons of this difficult decision. They wondered whether they would be able to give up their daughter and how it would affect both them and Aurora. But they also considered the uncertain future they were facing and the opportunity to provide a better future for their daughter. Despite their doubts and heartache, Sarah and Daniel agreed to explore this possibility. They decided that before making a final decision, they would talk to the wealthy couple from the neighboring town and learn more about their intentions and the environment Aurora would be in. With heavy hearts, but full of hope for a better future for their daughter, Sarah and Daniel began to prepare for a meeting with the wealthy couple, knowing that the decision they would make would have a lasting impact on their lives and Aurora's fate. At first, Daniel was horrified by the suggestion. How could they even consider parting with their own flesh and blood, their beloved daughter? The thought of losing Aurora was too agonizing for him to bear. He imagined her innocent laughter echoing through the empty corridors of their modest home, and his heart broke at the thought of not having her by his side. However, as the days passed and the financial difficulties deepened, Daniel found himself reluctantly accepting Sarah's proposal. He knew they couldn't go on like this, constantly struggling to survive and provide the basics for Aurora. The idea of offering her a better life, with more opportunities and comfort, began to creep into his thoughts. Daniel felt torn between his love for his daughter and his responsibility to ensure her well-being. He wondered if it was selfish to keep Aurora by his side, even if it meant depriving her of a better life. The prospect of giving her a loving family and adequate financial resources began to weigh heavily on his mind. Finally, after much thought and discussion with Sarah, Daniel agreed to consider the proposal of adoption. He knew this decision wouldn't be easy, and his heart ached at the thought of parting with Aurora. But he also recognized the importance of doing what was best for his daughter, even if it meant sacrificing his own happiness. After much thought and agony, Sarah and Daniel made the fateful decision to sell their baby to the wealthy couple in exchange for a substantial sum of money. It was a choice that weighed heavily on their hearts, but they convinced themselves that it was the only way to guarantee a stable future for Aurora. With tears in their eyes and broken hearts, Sarah and Daniel met with the wealthy couple to finalize the details of the adoption in secret. The meeting was filled with intense emotions as they said goodbye to the daughter they loved so deeply. Aurora, so young and innocent, had no idea what was happening around her. She smiled and babbled as she was delivered into the arms of the wealthy couple, oblivious to the heartbreaking pain of her biological parents. For Sarah and Daniel, the moment of parting was unbearable. They held Aurora with all the love and affection they possessed, memorizing every detail of her face, hoping that she would never forget the love they felt for her. When the moment came to part, Sarah and Daniel hugged each other tightly, promising each other that they would always remember the love they shared with their daughter. With tears streaming down their faces, they watched Aurora being taken away, leaving a deep void in their hearts. After the wealthy couple left with Aurora, Sarah and Daniel were left alone, facing a mixture of pain, regret, and despair. They wondered if they had made the right decision, if they had done what was best for their daughter, or if they had just sacrificed their own love for greed and despair. As they watched their daughter being taken into the arms of her new parents, Sarah and Daniel felt a twinge of guilt and regret, but quickly put these feelings aside, focusing on the financial relief the money would bring them. After all, they believed they were doing what was best for Aurora, providing her with a life of comfort and opportunities that they themselves could not offer. So even with a heavy heart, they tried to suppress their emotions and move on, hoping that the decision they had made would bring a better future for everyone. Months passed and Sarah and Daniel tried to get on with their lives, dulling their guilt with material possessions and distractions. They immersed themselves in a lifestyle they couldn't have imagined before, spending the money they received from the adoption on superfluous and luxurious things. They bought expensive clothes, state-of-the-art electronics, and went on exuberant trips, all in an attempt to fill the void left by Aurora's absence. However, no matter how hard they tried, the feeling of guilt persisted, haunting them in moments of silence and solitude. They found themselves constantly tormented by the decision they had made, questioning whether they had made the right choice in sacrificing love for their daughter in exchange for material riches. Despite their attempts to suppress these feelings, guilt and regret continued to haunt them, turning their life of appearances into an unbearable burden. Try as they might, Sarah and Daniel couldn't escape the remorse they felt in their hearts. Now they were facing the consequences of their actions, realizing that no amount of money or material possessions could replace the love and bond they shared with their daughter. As time passed, they found themselves increasingly lost, not knowing how to deal with the crushing weight of their guilt and regret. But deep down, they could never shake the feeling that they had made a grave mistake, that they had betrayed their own daughter for the sake of greed. And then one fateful day, a letter arrived on their doorstep that would change everything. The letter was from the wealthy couple who had adopted Aurora, informing Sarah and Daniel that their daughter had fallen seriously ill and was not expected to survive. The shock and anguish that flooded Sarah and Daniel when they read those words was indescribable. Their hearts clenched with pain and guilt as they now faced the possibility of losing Aurora forever. Sarah and Daniel looked at each other, their eyes brimming with tears as they absorbed the devastating news. They wondered if all this was a consequence of their decision to give Aurora up for adoption. Feelings of guilt and regret flooded them, making them question whether they deserved forgiveness or whether they were condemned to live with the weight of their choices forever. They felt an overwhelming desire to rush to Aurora's side, to be by her side in her darkest moments, even if it meant facing the consequences of their actions. But they knew they couldn't just show up on the rich couple's doorstep, unannounced. They would have to wait in anguish for more news about Aurora's state of health. As they waited anxiously for updates, Sarah and Daniel found themselves caught up in a whirlwind of emotions. They regretted the choices they had made and prayed desperately for a miracle for their beloved daughter. At the same time, they blamed themselves for not being by Aurora's side when she needed them most. The letter changed everything for Sarah and Daniel, bringing to light all the consequences of their actions. They were now at a crossroads, forced to confront the repercussions of their decisions and decide what they would do next. But one thing was certain: their lives would never be the same after the terrible news they had received. Devastated by the news, Sarah and Daniel rushed to the nearby town to be by Aurora's side and see her in person.